Good morning. We have a really marvelous panel today. All of the team here is actually some of the best minds and thinkers in sports for digital. I'm going to kick us straight off by asking Kelly a question. The last time we were on a panel together, you were just starting out with your venture with Tencent in China. It's been about a year. How's it going?
Tencent, yeah, you're correct. We've been partnered with them for about, I'd say, a little over 18 months now. And so we just came out of our first season of doing a whole season of NBA-related content with them. They are an amazing platform, right? And they are deliver, reach and scale and, a young, passionate sports fan audience in China, which is, it's been an incredible sort of collaboration for us and a lot of learning for us. And I think, we really had to challenge ourselves to figure out new ways for ESPN to basically create and deliver content around that partnership. So we've started doing things that we had never really done before. And a good example of that is something that we call on court. So basically where we have Mandarin speaking reporters in the States that we've hired that go to 5 NBA games a week and interview a lot of the sort of stars of the NBA on behalf of Tencent. And we feed that live into Beijing. And they incorporate it into their studio broadcast, their live feed of the game. And it took us a while to sort of figure that out and figure out the types of content that would really appeal to fans, and do things in a more sort of short form, very, very local way that also makes Chinese sports fans feel a lot closer to the game and the sports that they love. Okay,
I'm going to ask Sam a question, which is, Sina's always been a digital-first organization, so hearing how ESPN is kind of evolving their approach for fans in China around sports that they love. Why is the Sina approach a little bit different, having been always a digital-first company?
Yeah, I think Sina's been around for almost 20 years, and we've really focused on providing the best content to the fans. But now I think one of the big things we're doing is taking the sports section of this big portal, of this big website, and really bringing it and creating its own company. And when we do that, we're trying to diversify our revenue, we're trying to diversify our business. And so we're now, the content publishing platform is just one of three of our businesses, right? So that's the first one, and that's our traditional bread and butter. But we also have Weibo, which is the biggest open social media platform in China. And when we look at Weibo, it's got 360 million monthly active users, much bigger scale than just the Sina Sports content publishing platform. So when we look at that, we want to say, hey, look, let's bring all of the sports content onto social. Let's use social to really create the conversations and get the fans engaged in a different way. And also that diversifies our revenue a little bit there. And then we're really focused on our offline business. We have created China's leading 3-on-3 basketball tournament. We've created China's leading 5-on-5 football tournament. We got skiing coming up. We got a junior ice hockey league. We got marathons. So that's a whole different line of business that not so relevant to the OTT business, but from our perspective, it really brings a different dynamic to our business, right? Because then we're talking operation, we're talking admissions fees and sponsorship fees and broadcasting and all of those different components that really, I think we kind of took a playroom from Kelly's playbook, when looking at X Games and what X Games brought to ESPN. I mean, that's really our concept there. So those are our 3 lines of business at this point.
Okay. The experiences that you're talking about seem to be much more molded to the audience. And we had talked earlier about convenience. So what were you discussing in terms of convenience, Ervin?
So we are a sports content provider, and we've done that really well in the traditional sense when we've put sports content to consumers on a linear channel. Now, as consumer preferences change and the time that they spend on other platforms is increasing, we need to look at how we serve that consumer better. And we started off a number of years ago with Fox Sports Play 4 years ago, where we started simulcasting an authenticated service where consumers were able to view the traditional linear channel on that app. But it goes beyond that, right? I mean, it's not just the same content that consumers expect. Their expectation is slightly different, right? So how do you serve the consumer better? It's going down to not just taking the traditional content that we have, cutting that up into a 2-minute piece and putting that on digital. It is how do you, that is, I suppose, creating a convenient way of providing that content to the consumer. But beyond that, how do you improve the quality of it, right? So is there any specific localization that we need to do where a sports fan in a local market who doesn't have a very strong grasp of English is able to engage with that content in a far more superior way? And also, what does it mean for a consumer who is in a market, perhaps stuck in traffic, wants to find out about what their favorite football team is and how they're doing in the league table? Well, there's a connectivity issue there, perhaps, right? So it's not the traditional video anymore. Maybe it is imagery that they're interested in, or maybe it's just standard text. So it's being all things to the consumer at all times. Now, that's a very tall order, right? But how do you do that is a challenge. And I'm not going to say that we've figured this out. We are on a journey. We're quickly learning. We're trying different things and getting a sense of what resonates with consumers, and doing more of that and less of what consumers are not consuming.
Okay. And Ervin, you're part of the team at Ooyala, vastly knowledgeable on sports and delivery. What are you working on now that helps broadcasters to deliver these unique experiences, and why is it a benefit to broadcasters?
Right. So Ooyala is the leading technology player in the OTT market. So we started off providing complex OTT solutions, but a lot of that's changed in the past year. We've spoken to our customers, we've heard what they want, and we've realized that it's a lot more complex. It's now becoming less of a OVP solution, but more of an IVP solution, an integrated video platform, whereby you're not only looking at the delivery of content, but you're also looking at the monetization of the content and the simplifying of the workflows that come before that. I'll give you a couple of examples, right? One of our customers in the UK, right, who do the EPL, one of the requirements that they had was that the consumer required them, or the customers wanted to see replays as soon as the goals were scored, right? So in addition to doing the live feeds on an OTT platform, we were also being able to do live to VOD through complex media logistics workflows and distributing them to all registered worldwide partners within 5 minutes of a goal being scored. So if you were a paid licensed user and you had an app, you could see highlights within 5 minutes of a goal being scored, originally cut from the team in the UK, sent out to the world, right? So that's something that we feel is important to the industry, and it's something that, you know, as a technology partner, we're helping to enable based on the requirements of the customer. Another one that comes straight to mind is that the next 3 Olympic Games are going to be in the Asian region. I mean, Japan's already talking about 8K. I mean, and we know that Pyeongchang, the Winter Olympics, is going to be heavy on VR, right? So we've partnered with Intel, right, to manage their VR 360 content, that they're going to be working with the OBS, right, so that they can sell those exciting 360 view contents to the rights holders, and the rights holders can then decide if they want to make that available to their users. So we're just enabling the technology so that the rights holders have the rights, have the capabilities to push it forward.
That sounds really exciting.
Yep.
I'm going to ask a question for the business managers on the panel. These technologies are not easy to deploy. So that's what we do every day. We look at technologies, we look at the technology integration, how to do systems integration with existing systems. It's vastly complicated. How is this impacting your strategy? How are you addressing it? And is there any end, you know, how do we actually make the justification for investing in new technologies when we still have a very young sort of an economic model around digital distribution and revenue generation? So technologies, is this an easy thing to approach? And how are you approaching the cost of providing VR and 8K and all the rest of it? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think, you know, there have been a couple recent examples, right, of streaming gone bad, right? I think, you know, anybody here who tried to watch the Mayweather fight may have been a little bit disappointed at times from the feed, right? So it's, you know, when you're a fan and you're consuming this stuff, it looks really easy, but the back end is incredibly complicated, as you know very well. And I think, one of the ways that ESPN is addressing that is through our parent company, Disney, making an investment, a majority investment now in BAMTech, which, no offense to Ooyala, I think, is one of the best sort of backbone and infrastructure sort of tech stacks in the world. And by doing that, I think, we're really solidifying our position with one of the better sort of streaming backends that we can. And, I think, the justification for those types of investments are in the quality of the service that you're able to deliver. We don't suffer a lot of feed downtime. Our SLA is the 99.9%.
5 nines, yes, it is.
Exactly. And we've had that experience, back in the ESPN Star days of not having that be the case. And I think, so the justification for making those types of investments is in being able to deliver a top-notch service to fans, which is critical. People get super frustrated. They'll, once you lose them forever. So.
Okay. Ashwin, with Fox Plus coming into the fore, Fox Sports, Fox Network Group, you guys are really leaning forward on OTT. How are you going to differentiate yourself, and how are you going to, what's your strategy on revenue generation?
So with Fox Plus, which is our OTT offering, that is the only OTT offering in the market that has sports alongside a host of other content.
Oh, except for Hotstar.
Live sports, right? And okay. And also catch-up service. So the strategy with Fox Plus very much is to take the sports content and all of the content that we have to consumers and offer that to them on a device that perhaps they wish to consume content on but weren't able to do in the past. We are doing this in partnership and close concert with our affiliate partners, and we are collectively taking this to consumers, and the revenue model there is to package it as part of the overall subscription bundle that consumers subscribe to through the affiliates at the moment.
Okay, and Sam, you mentioned before that your daily actives and your monthly actives, part of your sports strategy is to tap into that, and you're creating products that really appeal to the largest percentage of your audience. What's driving it? And you have a lot more freedom because of your tight-knit ecosystem to do things that are individually tailored to your audience. What's driving that? What is your upper scale? And what's going to make you bigger than any of the other people on this stage?
Well, I think our biggest benefit is the fact that we have 2 online platforms, right? We have the broadcasting business, and then we have the social business. So at the same time, a lot of times, we're able to very quickly see where the trend is going. And whenever it comes to technology, I think you have to adopt. I think it's absolutely necessary to adopt new technology as it comes out, and you have to embrace it, right? Because if you go back 20 years and you're looking, when you think about the live game, after the live game occurs, then you're waiting maybe 2 hours, 3 hours before you see the highlights on the evening news or on SportsCenter. But now it's literally seconds after that basket has been scored, that goal has been scored, then you're seeing it everywhere already. You know who scored, literally everything about it is described to you. So, in that aspect, then you have to keep up, right? You have to say, well, I need that highlight now, literally seconds after it happens. And that's one of the good things from a social perspective is because we are able to see that the fans are asking for those things on social. Right, because the second you score, someone is posting on Weibo or tweeting it out on Twitter and saying, hey, look, this just happened. And then immediately hundreds of fans are asking to see the highlights, right? So when we look at that and we say, okay, well, that's something that we need to adopt. That's something that we need to absolutely make sure that we have, whether it's this cycle or the next cycle. So when Weibo now with deals with NBA and La Liga and the Chinese Soccer League, all of those things have been implemented. Right, so now you're seeing almost instantaneous, displays of the game, basically, through these short-term highlights that you're not seeing before. So I think that's just using it as an example, but I think every type of technology that can be used and the fans are asking for, absolutely, we have to provide that to them.
Are you measuring that in order to sort of measure brand impact for your sponsors?
Yeah, I mean, I think the brands are absolutely looking for that type of new ways of accessing instantaneous information and new ways of getting to the users, right? So we've worked with different brands. Clear has a segment called Winning Moments, and basically that goes across sports. That's the moment in the game that's the most crucial moment. They want that highlight. They want 30 seconds of that. They want it as soon as it happens, and everything is branded Winning Moment by Clear. Right, so that's something that we can push out to them because we have the capabilities to do so. If we don't have it, then they wouldn't be able to do that. Just go somewhere else, I guess.
It sounds like a good deal. You mentioned the fact that you're integrated with your Weibo division, but for some of the other entities in sports and broadcasting, especially in digital, there are other social players who are, let's say, experimenting with sports. And I have my personal opinion on how this will end up, but I'd like to hear your opinions. Are we going to see new challengers coming into this market from a social platform side? And if so, is this really where they are going to find success?
Well, I think we talked a little bit before we came out on stage about competition, right? And so I think when you look at just the overall competitive landscape, sports has always been incredibly competitive. If you look at sort of, back in the old days of free-to-airs competing for different rights and then evolving to pay TV platforms going out and directly acquiring rights to now different streaming platforms getting into the business. And I think, the social platforms play a role where hopefully companies like Fox, companies like ESPN can be smart about ways to collaborate with those platforms. But at the end of the day, sports is a small component of what they do, right? And when I think about, sports is ESPN's DNA. It's the only thing we do. We do it 24/7. We do it 365 days a week, and we do it in multiple languages, multiple countries. I think, and Fox Sports is the same, right? It's the only thing we do, and it's all we ever think about. So when you look at Facebook getting into live streaming of certain sports events, when you look at some of these platforms like Amazon getting into sports rights acquisition, the competitive landscape has always been pretty fierce and pretty varied. I think I actually think there's enough room for everybody to sort of serve fans in different ways, and I think we'll continue to try to just create the best local content that we can to attract fans, and they will continue to experiment, and hopefully we can figure out ways to partner with them on that.
Okay.
I agree with you 100%, and I think we are only going to be, well, nothing's changed, right? There's always been competition. There still is competition. The competitors have changed slightly. And I think the end benefactors of this stiff competition that we see right now are the consumers, right? Because the competition's forced us, and we were talking about this earlier, it has forced us to think differently about what we used to do and produce different kind of content, new kind of content, which is not just the 90 minutes, going beyond the 90 minutes. I mean, yes, you could live stream a game in any of the platforms, but that's not the be-all and end-all of sports. There's more to sports than that 90-minute game or whatever the minutes are of the game. There's more to it. How do you cover that in a comprehensive way? And how do you cover that, to your point, in a very localized market as well, right? Is it just the international sports that someone in Indonesia cares about? No, perhaps there are local leagues that they care about. How are they being served by these big platforms, right? So I think it is... going back to what I was saying, I think this has forced us to think about how we serve our consumers and serve them intelligently and in a far more meaningful way.
As a broadcaster, I absolutely agree with what these guys are saying. I think putting on my social hat from the Weibo side, I think as a platform, Weibo is there to provide content to the fans. But as a platform, it's not a content producer. Right, so what it's looking for is for folks like ESPN, like Fox, to come onto the platform and to provide the content. Because without the content, then the network, the social media network doesn't really exist, right? So at the end of the day, I can't speak for Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, but from our perspective, we're not trying to become the content publisher. We're trying to create a platform on which fans can be social, can engage with each other, can engage with interesting content. And so really, I think from the social perspective, we love to have the content publishers on our platform. We don't really see it as a direct competition of any sort.
And it makes perfect sense for a content producer such as ourselves to be on that platform, right? Because ultimately, that's where the consumers are, and they're spending an increasing amount of time on these platforms. And if we are going to maintain that share of mind and attention with them and entertain and inform them about sports, we need to be partnering up and working with you guys and reaching that audience.
Right, because the conversation is happening with or without you, right, on social. So, I mean, that's one of the big things that we realize from the Sina Sports perspective is, we need to be on social, we need to be on Weibo. So now we have created 40 different Weibo accounts. We have over 60 million followers on Weibo. I know ESPN's got over 100 million on Facebook and on Twitter and Instagram. I mean, you have to go where the fans are. Right? I mean, 30 years ago, that may be in the bar or that may be at home in the living room, but now it's increasingly mobile, it's increasingly social, and that's where you just have to go. For Weibo, we're 92% mobile. That means nobody is using it, no one is sitting at home in their living room watching TV and playing on their PCs anymore. So then you just have to adopt, right?
92% mobile, that's a really good number. These audiences, how are we monetizing them? Strategically, I mean, the technologies are incredible. Distribution, I used to say the only two things I'm going to pay for are ad serving and distribution. I'll make my own tech, I'll serve my own tech, I'll store everything on my own. But you got to pay for advertising and you got to pay for distribution. So how are you looking at it? How are you monetizing these audiences? What's your primary approach? What's your secondary approach? And how's it working?
Well, ESPN has, the largest digital network in the world, right? So we're the #1 digital network, and a lot of that is through advertising and partnerships with sponsors. I mean, there is in certain markets, of course, there is a secondary digital revenue stream, which is basically through authenticated streaming services. So kind of piggybacking off the old pay TV bundle model, right? But primarily it's about working with sponsors and advertisers.
Okay. Joshua?
It's a mix, very much the same. It is a portfolio of revenue streams, affiliate revenue, and from a digital perspective, it is monetizing that attention that we have with sports fans through advertising. Now, that could be your traditional banner ad or a pre-roll, either sold directly or through programmatic. But increasingly, the conversations that we're having with brands is, one of an integrated sponsorship opportunity. So how can we enable brands bring the brand heritage and tell the brand stories to consumers, right? Because gone are the days where you could put an ad in front of a consumer and expect them to buy whatever it is that a brand wants them to buy. It's far more nuanced than that, right? Because consumers have choice now. The minute I see an ad, that's a cue to go away and do something else, right? So how do you convince a consumer to stay with you and have the brand pass their message on, right? So that's through creating branded content, storytelling, which we do really well, and extending those capabilities to a brand. So we're working in close partnership with a number of brands on doing precisely that, not just on digital, but it is a holistic approach. How do we do that on linear? How do we do that on digital? And also, if there is an on-ground activation that we need to do, well, we have presence in this market, and we can enable that.
Okay. Sam, you mentioned your programs for winning moments. You probably do a lot of this stuff because it's been the approach in China for digital and streaming and integration of brands. What do you see being the most successful versions of this? And is there something on the horizon that you see that's working or generating promise of new revenue?
Well, I think I always forget that China is digital first compared to the rest of the world. So, we really don't consider a lot of those linear options. We don't consider, the 30-second ads that you're putting up on TV. But I think from our perspective, China is still in it's still an early growth stage. And at this point, we unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of having two separate streams of revenue, right? I mean, for the rest of the world, you have advertising and then you have a subscription model. But in China right now, that subscription model, it's not viable in the short term. I think medium term, long term is definitely something that will happen. I just don't think in the next couple of years that that's something that's going to develop rather quickly. And also with the rise in the license fees as well, in the last 2 years in China, it's gotten to a point where the math just doesn't work, even if you're able to put together a paid subscription model. So that really leaves us in a bit of an awkward situation because with advertising the way it is and also like I said, the license fee increase, you can be creative, you can innovate, but at the same time, from Sina's perspective, I mean, we're a public company, so when you look at the P&L, a lot of times it doesn't quite work. So from our perspective, more of the innovation is happening not really in the advertising industry, but in what we're doing to offset that difference in the gap. And so one of the things we're doing on content publishing is to make sure that we're getting highlights, we're getting videos, and to provide a better coverage in the case that we don't have a live broadcast. And then on Weibo, we're actually increasing the amount of content that's on there outside of those 90 minutes. So getting content creators, some UGC type content, MCN type content from YouTube and from Facebook, and getting them onto the social media platform there, because obviously there is a higher monetization model, is a higher CPM, and then the offline model. Right. So when we bring in a sponsor, to our 3-on-3 basketball tournament, like McDonald's, like Peak this year, that's money that wouldn't have gone to our advertising publishing platform. But instead, it's coming in because it's a different way of for the sponsors to reach their fans, and it's a way that seems more innovative to them. That's more interesting to them.
So your on-ground activations are your golden leagues, your 3-on-3, your 5-on-5 football. These are creating a second channel for you, and it sounds like they're very popular.
Yeah, because it's the only way to be able to link your offline and your online product, right? So for McDonald's, for example, so our 3-on-3 basketball goes on for 6 months, and we're in 24 cities. So we're in one city every weekend. We pick a winner. Then at the end, we take all 24 winners, bring it to Beijing, and we do a big finale. It's on CCTV. It's on multiple platforms in China, and it's got a great audience. We have over 1 million fans, Weibo fans, following that league. So when McDonald's comes in for a sponsorship as opposed to just a pure ad sale, then they're getting exposure in 24 cities over 24 weekends. That's offline. And then online, we're creating a set of viral comic book strips for them. So every week, we have an artist who draws what's happening this weekend in Chongqing, in Chengdu, in Shanghai. And then we bring a story. And this is something that could go viral online. And then for McDonald's, you're getting a very comprehensive set of advertising, as opposed to just a banner ad or a pre-roll.
Okay. Let's take a turn. Ervin, we haven't raised the issue of piracy. But really, I wanted to ask you about the technologies that you guys are deploying to help us do advertising display more efficiently, more measurably, and also to defeat ad blockers. So we got 2 questions here. One is, how are you helping clients with, let's say, DRM on demand? And how are you helping clients with technologies that insert ads in the cloud so they can't be ad blocked?
Right. So let's take the ad blocking question first. I think ad blocking is something that's, it's a chicken and egg situation. If somebody has put an ad blocker on, you know that if you bypass them, we have the technology to bypass it, but we've had conversations with a lot of our customers whereby, it's a case of, there's a reason why the guys put an ad blocker on. And if you bypass it and serve an ad, you are technically pissing off the customer. Is that what you want? Right? So that's the question that's always come about, and that's one of the reasons why, even though the technology for ad blocking, bypassing ad blocking has been available for a long time, it doesn't see the highest take-up rate, because at the end of the day, the brand still wants to protect the loyalty of their customer, and in certain ways, they like to take it a little bit more subtle, whereby we've seen publishers actually put up a little note that says, hey guys, we know you've got an ad blocker on. Do you mind turning it off, so that we can serve you the ad, because that's what keeps the business going, right? It seems to have gone down the other route more than the I can force an ad onto your platform at this point in time. That's what we are seeing a lot of it. I mean, the technology is there, but it's something that a lot of our customers have been very careful to implement, and we've not particularly seen a big uptake in it, because when we speak to the customer, again, it's I don't want to piss the end user off because he's taken a choice to put an ad blocker up, and I'll go the subtle way by saying, I know you have an ad blocker. Do you mind taking it down? Because we have to serve ads. That's our revenue stream.
And those are sports clients?
Well, not particularly sports clients. A lot of them are news clients that actually run sports, right? But if it comes to sports, most of it comes from paid. So you don't see very much of that. In India, ads are tolerated. And hence, when we do, we serve ads for one of the largest broadcasters in India for sports, and they do huge numbers. I mean, we're talking about more than 5 million concurrent ads being served, and they are quite happy with the fact, because you don't see it. But in markets where ad blockers are prevalent, Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, you don't get that much of an A1 market there.
And Vietnam and Thailand. So in India, you're working with Star?
In India, we're working with Star, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Without naming names.
You can name names, it's okay. Their concurrency numbers are astronomical. So the Star team and the Cricket and Hotstar, they are an industry standard for us to monitor and to follow. And their knowledge base in terms of working that network and delivering an experience is almost second to none. So you can mention them. The fact you're doing ad serving at scale is very impressive. Piracy. It used to be so expensive to do digital rights management that we would only use tokenization. So if you were a subscriber, we'd authenticate you, we'd tokenize the stream, but that's not perfect. Now we're getting into a situation where you can do digital rights management on almost any piece of content.
Yep.
Are we doing it? That's the question. Are you currently deploying, what's your DRM strategy? How are you protecting your assets? And sports is one of the most, next to Game of Thrones, one of the most pirated content categories in the world. So what's your idea on DRM? What's your strategy going forward? Are you doing it? Are you not? And why?
Yes, so we are doing it, and to be honest, it's a requirement from a lot of our rights holding partners, right? So a lot of the leagues, if you're acquiring their rights, then there are very sort of strict parameters around what their expectations are for DRM. So yes, absolutely, it's part of the critical mix of things that you need to be able to offer to your partners in turn.
Much the same, really. So we're working with the. It is a mandate to make sure that we tackle piracy. So we are working with platforms to ensure that we give them everything that they need in terms of streams to make sure that they're able to identify piracy as it happens and take that down. But also, I think we need to address it from a consumer's perspective, right? So the question is, if piracy is rampant in a market, that means that the consumer is underserved, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that you take the rights that you have and make it free in that market, but perhaps there is another way to engage with that consumer. So going back to what Sam was saying, I mean, one of the things that we do with sports is all about key moments. So one of the things that we do is we use social media platforms to clip key moments of the game and put that on social media, and we find tremendous engagement with that kind of content. So this is a consumer who perhaps doesn't have access for whatever reason, right, to the linear channel and the broadcast that we have, but they're still able to engage with the content, right? We create those opportunities. And then the next step of the process is trying to figure out how we monetize that, right? So maybe there's a sponsorship opportunity there where we run ads against that and monetize that. But So it's taking a dual-pronged approach, right? We absolutely need to clamp down on piracy. That is a game of whack-a-mole, and we will continue to play that. But also, further the needs of the consumer and see how we can address them in a meaningful way.
Sam?
I think on social, there's piracy as well, right? So what we see on Weibo is, I mean, with China, obviously, there's a bit of a conceptual issue. So, part of what we do is the education about, what it does it mean to pirate someone's content, right? So on social, if a person puts up a post that he's created a UGC content, around his own basketball game or whatever, then someone else might take that, and the easiest thing to do is just to repost it, right? But a lot of times, then people would take that video, they will grab it somehow using a third-party tool, and then they will upload it again as an original post and treat it as their own video. Now, we're trying to educate people that not to do that, but people don't like the reposting and all that stuff, and we understand. So we're trying to look at the user behavior and help them understand what it means, right? And so one of the things we're doing now is to make it easier for people to take the link of the video, and then when they do an original post, which they like to do, then they do the original post, they can just put that link there. And when they use that link, then the original content creator gets the credit. The number of views ends up on that video. It's the same video. It's no longer a brand new video. So our algorithm is able to register that, and we're able to put in a credit to that particular Weibo account and say, hey, this is the account that created this video. So that helps with clamping down on the piracy a little bit. So I think from our perspective, that's how we're dealing with it.
Okay. When we talked about competition, we touched on social networks exploring sports, Amazon exploring some sports programming to become more of a content wheel. Two questions. First question, ESPN has announced a direct-to-consumer model in the US. How does that impact your strategy and your vision for Asia? Kelly.
Well, I think our focus always has been and will continue to be on creating the best possible local content experiences. That is a very sort of US announcement, and obviously sort of the 800-pound gorilla in the room of late as far as OTT press announcements. So, I think, will we look at employing those models, deploying those models across Asia? Absolutely. As well as sort of, looking at every other way of kind of connecting with fans in the most locally relevant, creative, compelling way.
Okay. Why have we not seen, we have seen new entrants coming into the market. Brands that have gone into sports rights have had a more digital kind of first strategic approach, or at least a balanced approach. And why are we not seeing more successes from people who come in, let's say, as NBA, or come in and do a direct, I'm the rights holder, I'm the rights owner, and I'm the digital distribution platform? Why is that not driving revenues in Asia? Why are we not seeing more of that?
Well, I think, there are a couple reasons, a lot to do with money, right? So it's, for starters, the costs of running these services and running them well can be pretty daunting. I think, the costs of rights acquisitions is both pretty, it's a pretty fragmented rights market, and, an expensive one to jump into. And, finally, I think the fragmentation of how fans are consuming the content comes into play, right? So you've got a very short span of time to sort of attract somebody's attention and retain it, and there's a ton of choice. So I think there are a lot of people who are delivering top quality sports OTT services across Asia now. Obviously the Fox experience being one of them. And smaller sort of, niche services like the NBA League Pass or like, Rugby Pass. There's a lot of great services out there, but I think, it's hard to bundle all of that into one ultimate destination when you think about the cost of acquiring all of those rights and the cost of delivering that service.
Okay. Ashwin?
Economics. Just the economics of doing it in every market. At one level, it's quite easy to think of Asia as one huge market, but it isn't, right? It's it is every country. You've got to localize in that market, and how do you do that? Which is where I think they should partner with someone like us and work with us to get into a market. More than happy to work with them.
Sam?
I think user behavior as well. You've gone from content publishing more over to social now. So now you're kind of saying, well, let's move back to going to league pass and going to these individualized services. But I think fans are now so used to consuming content on Facebook, on Weibo, that it's very difficult for them to do that, right? I mean, again, Kelly mentioned this earlier, everything we do on content publishing is sports, sports, sports. But when you think about a general internet user, I mean, sports is not the only thing that's consuming, that they're consuming in their lives. So when you have someone like Facebook going in and already integrating sports into that, it's very hard to then take that back out and say, hey, look, here's a dedicated service for people to go after.
Okay. I'm going to close it there. Thank you all. Always appreciate the time that you take. If you have questions, they are all here for the next hour or two. I know we're going to bid Kelly farewell. Go say hi to your kids. We do love seeing you here. Thank you all for the time, for your insights. Can I have a round of applause for the panel?
Thank you very